Okay, the chair entrepreneurs is ready, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Ajahn Yun. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and the guests, good afternoon. I am great honor to welcome you to the Google discussion, the governance and BIMTEX. As part of third day Bengal Economic Dialogues 2024. Our theme this year is the new world orders and BIMTEX. Underscore the importance of the governance in navigating the complexity of our evolving global landscape. Before driving to the specific of governance within the BIMSTEC region, I think it's essential to consider the current global context. The world today is experiencing unprecedented changes, and the government play a very critical role in how nation navigates these challenges. In the BIMSTEC region, governance play a vital role in driving sustainable development, economic growth, and social stability. A primary challenge is the strengthening the rule of law and judicial system. Many BIMSTEC countries are working tirelessly to ensure justice, to protect rights, and create a stable environment for economic activity. This involves significant judicial reform and capability to building to enhance the effectiveness and independence of judicial institutions. Transparency in governance and is another critical area. Many member states are taking steps to enhance transparency and accountability in their governmental process to reduce corruption and foster trust among citizens. Implementing robust mechanisms for transparency and accountability is a crucial for creating a culture of openness and responsibility. In getting civil society is crucial for inclusive governance in the BIMSTEC region. The civil organization or CSO play an essential role in the policy making, ensure that diverse perspectives are considered. By fostering stronger engagement with CSO, member states can create a more inclusive and representative governance structure that reflects the needs and aspirations of their population. Regional cooperation among BIMSTEC countries enhance the sharing of best practice, resource and knowledge, collaborative initiative in areas such as infrastructure, development, trade, and environmental protection allow member states to tackle the common challenge collectively. This cooperation can lead to more effective and innovative solutions, improving governance outcome across the region. Continuous capacity building is essential for sustainable governance. Investing in the trainings and development of the public official and institution ensure that the governance practice are adaptable to changing current state. It includes developing skill in digital government, policy analysis, and public administration to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of governmental operation. Promoting democratic practice remains a significant focus for many BIMSTEC countries. Ensuring that government remain accountable in their citizens and uphold democratic principles is fundamental for long-term peace and prosperity. This involves strengthening electoral process, protecting human rights, and fostering inclusive political dialogues. Effective governance is essential in achieving the SDG by ensuring resources are allocated efficiency and equitability. A governance help improve health outcome, access to quality education, and gender equality. These improvements are fundamental to building the inclusive and balanced society. Governance is also ensuring that clean water, sanitation, and sustainable energy service are access to all. Effective governance in this sector prevent waterborne disaster, improve quality of life, and promote sustainable energy policy. These policies are crucial for addressing for addressing environmental challenges and fostering resilient infrastructure, which support industrial growth and innovation. Climate action is another area where governance is pivotal. Effective government priority, environmental sustainability, and climate action, ensuring that policies and practice mitigate climate change impacts, with protection to both ecosystem and human community, promoting long-term stability and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, today geopolitical situation is very complex. Many developed countries are competing to secure factor of production as it plays a crucial role for sustainable national development. Many BIMSTEC countries are home to serve what developed countries are looking for. In connection, indeed, to the fact that BIMSTEC is a key to grasp opportunity from competing interests. For example, member country may request for collaboration in area capacity building related to what member country need it most. As mentioned, good governance play a key role in trust buildings that may pave the way for further collaboration to realize a long-lasting sustainable development pursuits. The successful of this would mean that the sub-region of Bay of Bengal will become even stronger, able to withstand crisis and leverage their position to the world stage. We are privileged to have with us a dedicated lineup of speakers who will share their insight and expertise in various aspects of governance within the BIMSTEC region. Firstly, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Professor Masufasa Rahan, Little Bit of Fellow from the CPD in Dhaka, who will give our special remarks. Our panel today includes some of the most respected voices in the field of governance, Dr. So Hu, Executive Director of the Center of Economics and Social Development, Myanmar, and Dr. Haramachi Kasinacha, Director of Governance at the Center of Innovative Governance Practice, Kathmandu, Nepal, and Dr. Castellino Exiver, Senior Fellow at the Center of Social and Economic Progressing, or CSEP, New Delhi, India, and Professor Dr. Thopas Nomas from the Faculty of Economics at Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. Each panelist will have 8 minutes to share their insight on the following the critical topic essential to enhancing the governance in the BIMSTEC region, strengthening the role of law and judicial system, implementing strategy to enhance transparency, enhancing the effective engagement of civil society in governance and policy making, and about the collaborative governance initiative among the BIMSTEC country, building capacity for good governance practice and promoting the sustainable democratic practice in the region. As we engage in the dialogue, let us remember that the good governance is not merely a good but continued journey toward achieving inclusive and sustainable development in our people. The insight and the perspective shared today will undoubtedly contribute to a more robust and effective governance framework for the BIMSTEC region. Thank you for your participation. I now would like to invite Professor Masafara Rahat. Yes, yes, to deliver your special remarks. Professor Ramas, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I thought that I will speak like in other sessions at the last, and I will pick up some of the points that that our esteemed panelists would have talked, but I have been put in the initial. Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor, but you have set out the points very wonderfully, I think, and very insightfully. Some of the key issues with respect to the importance of good governance in the context of BIMSTEC-wide cooperation and integration. My point will be that when we talk about the importance of good governance in the context of BIMSTEC, there are two aspects of it. One is the normative aspect, the moral aspect, that we do need transparency, accountability, good governance, because it is morally correct, and an accountable system and a transparent system is what our countries need, both in terms of our individual country perspective and also in the context of the collective BIMSTEC perspectives. But the second point is that good governance is also good economics. And if we have good governance in terms of implementing the various initiatives that we have talked about in the first and second session, that also will make sense in terms of good value for money. We are talking about, for example, BIMSTEC transport master plan. If we really want to implement the master plan, it will have to be implemented at the country level, and then you connect the dots. Now, if there is corruption, if there is wastage, leakage, then obviously we cannot get the returns from the investment that we will be making. So, and that has become a major issue in many countries. I will not name countries, but it is a concern in many countries. So I would say that good governance is also essential in terms of achieving the aspirations that we have talked about. Okay, so it's very important. Otherwise, we will end up with investing but not getting the returns, internal rate of returns, financial rate of returns, economic rate of returns, and we are experiencing it at country level every day. So this is very important. Can we think of a BIMSTEC wide standard with respect to governance? That will also put pressure on individual countries to maintain certain standards of implementation, standards of accountability and transparency, which then put pressure on individual countries so that the good value for money is ensured. The second point is, you have mentioned about the role of the non-state actors, the civil society organization. I think that's also very important. We have talked in the last session, and there were questions from the floor with regard to the SDGs. The SDGs talk about whole of society approach. The SDGs talk about leave no one behind. So in terms of implementing the initiatives and measures to deepen BIMSTEC cooperation, we also have to think about that it has to be done in an inclusive way, that the civil society organizations like the think tanks, the private sector, they are not, against the state or the government, but sometimes they come up with constructive criticism. So the governments will have to take it in that spirit, but we don't see that in many countries. They think that if you come up with something which is against the state stance, then you are against the state. So I think that it is also very important that CSOs, think tanks are given the opportunity to express their views, and their views are taken into account in policy making, because it has to be a whole of society approach. It has to be an inclusive process of governance. The other is sort of, the third point is more of a technical. You see, if we, for example, if you think about implementing the transport master plan, as I said, it will have to be implemented at the country level. But when you connect the dots, the regulatory issues come, the interoperability of the systems come. So that's where also the regulations, governance of the regulations, I think, become very important when we talk about connecting the dots. So this is something I thought that is important. The other is, you have rightly mentioned about sustainability of whatever initiatives we take at the BIMSTEC level. And that sustainability will hinge on environmental ecological sustainability to a large point, which generally gets lost when you think about the short-term measures. There are also, I think, environmental groups, activists, advocacy groups. That is also part of the greater, accountability and transparency mechanism. So I think that that is also very, very important to take into account. The last point I think is the governance of the process itself. BIMSTEC Secretariat. I think that strengthening of the BIMSTEC Secretariat, and in the last session we have also seen how some of the expert group meetings, working group meetings don't take place frequently, and that was also mentioned in the last session. So I think that this is also very important, that that BIMSTEC Secretariat itself also is active in terms of its undertaking its mandate, and also at the same time the countries, the members, the 7 members also empower the BIMSTEC Secretariat with the financial human resources so that it can perform its mandated duties. So I think that from both normative point of view and also implementation and practical points of view, good governance is becoming very important in terms of achieving the objectives that we have put forward before the BIMSTEC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You mentioned very important point that I agree with you, that how to make BIMSTEC more transparency, and so how to foster the culture of good governance amongst the member country. But I would like you. I agree with you how to strengthen the BIMSTEC Secretariat that can conduct in a way that to move the BIMSTEC agreement forward together. Because compared with another agreement that Thailand joined, maybe XX or GMS, I think how to put to cooperate, move the BIMSTEC go far more than past. So I think we can keep the floor to the panelists, and we can back again. I would like to invite Dr. Sasu, Executive Director, Center of Economic and Social Development, Yang Khun Myanmar, to share your insight and your thoughts about the governance in BIMSTEC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank Chulalongkorn University, the Faculty of Economics, and Sanam, particularly for Professor Seninat and then also Professor Selim, for nudging me to come to this conference. And I really appreciate that I learned quite a lot about from the distinguished panelists, well, all these wonderful stories, and then also how the countries are trying to catch up with the new world order. So with that appreciation, I also like to request your permission to present something not about order, maybe a bit more about the disorder, which is coming out of my own country, Myanmar. And I'm very glad that Professor Raman actually preceded my presentation, because at least he come up with very good framework, especially about the positive aspects of the governance. And also you talk about the good economics and the non-state actors. But unfortunately, the story that I'm going to tell is more about the bad economics. And then also very lucrative trade, but it is not really helping anyone for the people. And then also the non-state actors who are not really helping anyone, but to enrich themselves, and then also try to cause a lot of problems, and we call it fragmented conflicts. So, as you can see in the two photos, the one is more about the pre-COVID photo that we had at the China-Myanmar border, where you can see a lot of trucks lining up. We have a very good trade with China and Myanmar before the COVID, and but the picture below is the last week photo, where you can see a lot of house cars actually running out of the northeast of Myanmar just to avoid the very, very violent conflicts in the northeast China-Myanmar border. So I think this is the two contrasting pictures. Unfortunately, this is what is happening in Myanmar. And then I wanted to, bring this, issue to your attention so that maybe perhaps when we talk about the way forward, but also there are many of us who are left behind, and not only left behind, but can cause a lot of implications to the regional stability. So I just wanted to bring up to your attention. Okay. Yeah, well, I'm going to talk, it's about the complex emergencies, which, the recently, the United Nations organizations, the three organizations, like OCHA, UNHCR, and UNICEF, come up with all very alarming situations in the country where, sorry, it's bouncing along the mouse. Mainly because of the ongoing conflicts in the country, we have a 18.6 million population in need of the humanitarian assistance, which is about 1/3 of the country. And then also the UNHCR mentioned about another 100,000 of people fleeing the country, especially in the western part of the border, our border with Bangladesh, where Bangladesh already has been dealing with the refugee crisis. And then also the UNICEF also mentioned about the 6 million children who are being affected by the educational disruptions. And then, so these are all these complex emergencies, multifaceted effects on the population with very likelihood of negative spillovers across the border. I think this is where the Bangladesh and India have been already facing huge challenges since before the COVID, and then of course Thailand and Laos have dealt with the situation in the recent months, in recent years, and then also China has already, our trade with China has already stopped for some time. So I think that's is how complex are they. And usually the humanitarian emergencies are being addressed by the international friends who are supposedly helping the crisis in Myanmar. Usually they focuses on the governance deficit as the main reason for the humanitarian crisis and the complex emergencies. And the ASEAN, as a regional association, came up with the 5-point consensus, focusing on the ongoing conflict and how to mediate the conflict resolution so that it can stop the humanitarian it can deliver the humanitarian assistance and stop the war. But unfortunately, I think the little has been paid attention to the other two aspects, which is about the illicit trade, which has grown out of control in the recent years. Right after the pandemic, also right after the political instability in the country, it has been rising rapidly, which associate with the fragmenting conflicts. And then the interaction between the illicit trade and fragmented conflict may be the much more powerful force which I think very little attention has been paid by the international community how to address some of these issues beyond the governance deficits. And sorry. Oh, well, these are the headlines from the international media, how this illicit trade, especially about, well, under the broad heading of the illicit trade, there are many other things that are happening, like poaching, wildlife trafficking, and then also the human trafficking and the money laundering, and then also the informal money transfer. But of course, what really caught the international headline is about the drug trade. But I would say that this also stimulates other illicit trade. And so once you have this very huge drug trafficking, it also can cause all kinds of other bad economics going along the trade flows. And and this is a picture that I would like to draw attention. I hope I don't jump too quickly on that. It's about, we used to talk a lot about the opium, the heroin as a drug, but nowadays it's no longer the name of the game. Actually, it is a synthetic drugs that is really menacing all the society, especially if you look at the West. It is about the synthetic drugs. And then I think we have the methamphetamine problems in our region, but it has not really come to the point where the West has already dealt with the crisis. But maybe perhaps this photo actually should tell you that this is not a small thing. And you can see the drug seizures reports from the UNODC reports in the recent years, and then you can see the trend is actually rising. If you compare with the 2017, the total amount of seizures actually jumped nearly 3 times. And this is only a seizure of the drug. And then you can see the countries that share land border with Myanmar is the one that suffer quite a bit with the drug flows. And especially the Thailand and Laos has been quite dealing with the problem. And you don't see a lot in China, India, but I'm not sure whether this is the good indicator or it is a bad indicator. Maybe perhaps the low CCS also may indicate there's a very little efforts, the law enforcement against the drug flows, and maybe I think the drugs have been flowing without being caught by the law enforcement. So I think this is where we are seeing what we call the balloon effect at infinitum, which is, once when you try to squeeze a balloon, it bulges from the other side. So this is a kind of a situation where you have the fragmented conflicts. When you try to tackle the synthetic drug production in one area of the country, these gangs can actually move to another area, and then that's where the underlying the conflict may have also augmented this balloon effect. And then synthetic drugs are quite cheap and simple to make, and so doesn't require the large territory like poppy cultivation in the past. So it is very attractive for the criminal gangs. And then also the only constraint on these gangs is that the amount of precursors that they can get. It's none other forces can actually constrain them because it's so easy to produce it. So in that sense, I think the easily imported precursors, because Myanmar does not really have any industries that has the capacity to produce any precursor chemicals. So we, the UNODCs and many other international organizations already indicated that these are actually flowing from our neighbors. So maybe perhaps this is where the cross-border cooperation is so important to tackle not just the drug outflows, but also the inflows of the precursor chemicals. So if you look at the next slide, I think you can see how the conflict in Myanmar has also attained recently by what they call the ACLED, the Armed Conflict Location, Event and Data Project. It's a huge and well-known database used by all the international, the security and conflict study programs. And according to their data, I think Myanmar actually became the most violent place in the world. In fact, our rank surpasses three other violent cases like Ukraine, where the deadliest conflict, where the fatality rate is quite high, and Palestine, in terms of geographical spread of the conflict, it's affect all over Palestine. But whereas Mexico, the dangers to the civilian population is quite high. So out of all these deadly conflicts, Myanmar actually surpasses others, mainly because of the very deadly effect of the fragmentation of the conflict, where you find not just dozens of non-state actors, but several hundreds of non-state actors who are not only fighting the central state, but also fighting among each other in control of all these area influence and also the illicit trade. So I think this is where I would like to come to my conclusion about how these these are the three latest maps that you can see. All the maps are quite correlated. One is the opium production in the border areas of the country, which has recently increased after the COVID. And then the synthetic drug seizures are also happening around these border areas, whereas the last picture, which put up by the Special Advisory Council of the Resistance Movement, they said these are all the areas under the effective control of the resistance movement. So it means that governance deficits and the weakening of the center actually lead to all these, the rising opium production, and then also the higher seizures of the synthetic drugs. So I think this is where you can clearly see all the related factors between the governance deficits, the fragmented conflicts, and then also the rising illicit trade. So I would like to come forward with the 4 areas of food for thoughts for the regional actors. Of course, at the regional level, we need, obviously, we need more collaborative governance initiatives on the synthetic drugs. So it is already, I don't know whether you have catch the number of tablets being seized in 2022, which is amount to 1 billion tablets. So this is usually the drug enforcement agencies always acknowledge that the seizure is less than 10%. So that about 10 billion tablet is more than the 4 billion populations that we have in the region. So given the fact that some of these synthetic drugs are very deadly, what is happening in the United States, it can actually kill off many of our populations. So it's a very big issue and big problem, and maybe perhaps our governments have the political will to address this. And then also, as a researcher and economist working on this issue, we also need to build the capacity of coming up with the evidence to inform the governments to tackle. There's a lot of economics behind this drug trade, but no one has actually paid attention to these economic factors. And when it comes to the specific issue about Myanmar, of course, the fragmentation is happening and in a very centrifugal way, so that most of the conflicts are all pulled by the big powers around us. And then maybe perhaps this is a warning that the more that the conflict will become the proxies for the region actors, the more that it can be quite deadly. So we should conclude by working on the promoting dialogue and how to manage the conflicts in Myanmar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your inside information. You have mentioned very topic that so it's great for us. managing complex emergency in illiterate, fragmented conflicts and governance deficit. Refugee crisis in Myanmar, cross-displaced population is called a negative spillover across border. And the situation is very complex and changing for international organizations to extend support. The next, you mentioned about the 4-point content trust focus on delivering humanitarian assistance and show very clear and that conflict in Myanmar stem from multi-decade of governance crisis. And you mentioned about the governance deficit across the other issue like drugs, increased synthetic drugs, which may require cross-border cooperation. It's very important for Thailand too. And the net and the balloon effects resonate well. The conflict continue. This makes things even worse. And so cross-border cooperation is crucial for tackle this problem. And you mentioned a weakening of the administration center is one of the cross contributing to conflict locally and perhaps expand regionally. Thank you very much for your very important issue. But we have limited time. I would like to move to the next panelist, Dr. Harimachi. The floor is yours. Please make your inside information.
Thanks, Honorable Chair. Just two observations in the beginning that BIMSTEC is primarily a sector-driven organization, and governance is not a sector in this specific sense, but is important across the board. It's important for all questions that we are discussing. So it's important then. The second question is, you should also be sometimes cautious about discussing governance in individual countries, because this might evoke some nationalistic feelings and so on. So normally it's difficult to handle the question of governance in individual countries. Despite these two difficulties, it is good to see that the organizers have tried to mainstream discussions on governance in these forums. And then I would like to thank the organizers for this basically innovative approach to handling governance also in these discussions. Of the several aspects of governance that the chair mentioned in his introductory remark, I would like to focus only on one aspect. That's the civil society, effective participation with civil society in terms of public policy making. So that would be my area of interest, given the time limit we have. On this question, I would like to handle 4 key questions, including one that is about the scope for BIMSTEC in terms of collaboration on governance issues. That's definitely my last point. But of the 4 points, the first point is the question is basically, why do we need policy partnership between the state and civil society? Now, in the BIMSTEC region, as elsewhere in the world, there is a wide variety of civil society organizations, ranging from informal organizations, CBOs, and informal local organizations, but also registered organizations formally set up in different countries. And all of these organizations have a role in terms of policy partnership, their ability to contribute to policy making. But the arena is basically captured by formally registered NGOs, which basically, by the time given global experience, much of the energy comes from the non-NGO part of civil society organizations. That's what we also need to think about, because normally when we speak of civil society, we tend to think of NGOs formally registered with wide networks and so on. But the informal part of it is community-based organizations, volunteers organizations, and so on. So that they have also the significant ability to participate in the policy process. Across the globe, also in BIMSTEC countries, new forms of civic activism we are seeing this. It's more participatory, it's perhaps informal, but issue-focused discussions on policy matters, and therefore very important for us to think about. Civic participation, self-organizing communities are also there, and they are also mobilizing societies in favor of good policies, good governance, etc. Speaking of good governance, Professor Raman said that good governance is also about good economics, but also that governance is supposed to be the exercise of political power. We also see that sometimes political power, good political power, is bad economics sometimes. We have seen examples that economic interests have been sacrificed for political interests. So this is also another reality of this, and we need to think about this. How could civil society contribute to the policy process? First, by policy analysis and advocacy that we are seeing. Much of civil society is doing this. Monitoring of the state agencies and state functionaries in terms of accountability systems. They are also helping us, the state basically, by building social capital. It's one major area for civil society organizations. And through which they articulate their beliefs, values, civic norms, and other things. Then they also mobilize particular constituencies, vulnerable groups, excluded groups from the state processes, marginalized communities, and so on. So they champion the cause of the marginalized groups. And also generally the development agenda, for example, they are the main, one of the main vehicles for international development also. They provide support to this system. So in that sense, there is much potential for progressive partnership between the state and policymakers, civil society, and others. Now, the second question is, can this happen? This is not easy because there are many challenges. For example, one fundamental challenge is the basic question of the recognition of civil society itself. Who represents civil society? There is this question, because when we invite civil society groups for policy making, there is a whole host of things and organizations that come forward, claiming that they represent society. And this is difficult to ascertain because the number is too big, large number. In my own country, Nepal, there are more than 55,000 NGOs, only registered NGOs. I was speaking earlier of all the informal groups. Only registered NGOs are 55,000 plus, and then in addition to these, there are civil society, community-based organizations. The definition question is an important question. Now, the standard definition is the space the civil society have is between the state and the market. Anything what is not the state and what is not the market is supposed to be the civic space, the civil society space. But how do you find appropriate partners to work with in this area is a question. Therefore, CSOs, despite the importance I mentioned earlier, are having a limited impact on policy and practice. The reason being, one, they normally tend to act on their own or sometimes in opposition to the state. In many state systems, they are seen as adversary of the state. And this limits their ability to influence the policy process. But also, they are not using the kind of evidence that we would have supposed they would do. So the evidence-based analysis and the feasibility of their studies and recommendations is also a question. And when they have some limitations in these two areas, their effectiveness in policy process remains limited. And thirdly, the adverse political context are also a question there. Therefore, in overall, the space for civil society operations is shrinking, which is also now two recent international reports subscribe to this idea. The Sweden-based VDEM, the Varieties of Democracy Institute, and the International Civil Society Association, Civicus, have come out with different reports, but they say that the democracy is overall backsliding, with implications for civil society operations. And in a number of countries, including, unfortunately, in the BIMSTEC region, there are freedom of expressions, operations for civil society. There are limitations imposed by the state systems. And so much so that in some countries, in order to be able to restrict the operations of civil society, state systems are, for example, using their anti-money laundering laws and so on. So there are some deliberate, but also some nuanced varieties of restrictions that are being placed on civil society organizations. Funding is a major problem, is a constraint, and especially the large NGOs, they depend on donor funding, which means sometimes they have to also work on the donor agenda because of the need to survive. Sometimes there are some issues that are not very favorable for them. So these challenges prevent basically civil society organizations from constructively engaging in the policy process. Now, some of the opportunities, my third question, I will come to the last question now. Third question, there are also some there are emerging concepts that favor civil society operations. For example, if you see the governance literature, the concept called NPG, New Public Governance, is about more broader participation of civil society organizations. The basic idea of NPG, they tend to challenge the state centricism in policymaking, and they ask for wide involvement of many actors in the management of state affairs. So this area is becoming important. If you take two examples from this concept of NPG, the concept of co-governance, meaning the policymaking collaboratively with civil society organizations, and co-management, leading the production of state services democratically together with the civil society organizations. So these offer a good chance for civil society to be part of the policy making system. And with NPG, we are seeing that it's not only about participation, but it is about converting participation into agency. So it's not a formal mechanistic participation, but also the agency questions come into the fore with the new public governance in operation. Finally, whether BIMSTEC has scope for collaboration, what can we do? I think there is some scope for BIMSTEC as an organization to engage in promoting governance issues. The commitment to SDGs could be a starting point because all of us are part of the SDG commitment. We are committed to this. So I think that's the starting point. And also in SDG, specifically SDG 16 and 17, they speak of one, the importance of fostering an inclusive and open society, one. And the two is the need for collaboration among all stakeholders to realize the 2030 vision. So I think with that, we can agree to cooperate in terms of promoting governance in BIMSTEC countries. Now that the SDG is important because civil society is first actor when there is an issue of communities being impacted by SDGs. And we are saying that because of the poly crisis in the world today, resources are being diverted from community services, and on that civil society organizations can help us in terms of that. The second is accountability systems should be strengthened. And again here, the BIMSTEC countries do not have a very high profile in terms of accountability. There are reports that, for example, the World Bank report on voice and accountability, which said that all BIMSTEC countries have looked at the ratings, etc. All of us BIMSTEC countries are towards the bottom 50 in the 190 plus countries, bottom 50 in terms of accountability. And this is where we can engage civil society in strengthening the accountability systems. And not to forget, also mentioned by the chair earlier, the climate action, pollution, biodiversity. They are the champions. They are the first responders to climate issues also. And there is one issue that we, BIMSTEC, could do collectively in this area. Also, there is some role for the civil societies themselves. They should be also strengthening their systems also. And on Professor Rahman spoke of BIMSTEC standards for good governance. I had this also on my agenda, and I think the CSOs in terms of regional cooperation, collaboration, etc. There must be a common standards, and so the first step could be then a white paper on governance, because we need to first agree what to cover, how to do, etc. And if we have a white paper on BIMSTEC governance, I think that should help us. And some other regional organizations are doing this. For example, the EU has finalized a white paper on governance. So we could also learn a lesson from this exercise and work toward this, because when you speak of governance, governance in many other countries is one thing, but also governance in the BIMSTEC organization itself is also a question. Decision making within BIMSTEC, working with the civil society, being open to private sector participation. Also, BIMSTEC as an organization should be able to tackle governance issues. So individual country governance, but governance in the BIMSTEC. Both of these issues could be understood better through the white paper, and then we could find the chart and action plan out of this exercise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. You have mentioned many issues that were so interesting. You mentioned about BIMTEC, the regional cooperation organization focused on sectoral development, and the role of civil society organization is crucial to contribute to the diverse policy making in the sub-region, and participating among the civil society organization will enable good governance in BIMTEC. And the active involvement among the civil society may help strengthen the sub-region, and the collaboration among civil society would lead to toward the strengthening BIMTEC in the year to come. And democracy is a backsliding cooperation, and participating from civil society may help sectoral participation. And you mentioned about new public governance is an interesting concept among the other useful concept, and SCG commitment is a good point to begin with this, and is line with the advancing accountability of governance system. Thank you very much. So we have limited time. I would like to invite the next panelist, Dr. Constantino. Please make your present and share information.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to be here. Thank you to all the hardworking team of SANEM and Chulalongkorn University, Department of Economics, for putting this together, for bringing us together. Always happy to say yes to any BIMSTEC conference. So when you called me, I said I shall be there. I think it's particularly symbolic because we have the decision makers in Delhi meeting exactly today, the BIMSTEC ministerial, national security advisors meetings, a variety of initiatives happening in Delhi, and we on the other side of the bay in Bangkok, where it all began almost 30 years, almost a third of a century ago, let's not forget. Here is where it all began, BIMSTEC. Here we are, civil society in many ways, discussing some ideas that hopefully will find way in traction towards the summit, and much delayed summit. But I thought I held my breath there for a second because I've been in Bangkok last July for another BIMSTEC conference. We thought it was going to happen in November. Inshallah, it'll happen now in Bangkok later this year. So I'll just, in my 8 minutes that I've been asked to speak, I'll say first that I'm impressed by the session because the organizers really pushed us hard to think about something we do not think about a lot. We often are reluctant to talk about, which is the political, democratic, normative dimension of a regional organization. The D word is there, democracy. And particularly surprising because this is mostly an economics-driven conference, Department of Economics, SANEM, etc. So particularly my double respect to economics, the economists in the room for thinking about the politics. And obviously you can think now, you can guess where I come from and what my training is in discipline. So on the session topic, we were asked to talk about rule of law and judicial systems, how to enhance transparency, effective engagement of civil society in governance and policy making, which has been addressed by Dr. Gimre, building capacity for good governance practices, and here we go, promoting and sustaining democratic practices in the region. So I will just share in the next 7 minutes 3 ideas. I think we have note takers because you want to come up with a Bangkok declaration tomorrow, some sort of summary, right, of what we have. And I think that's what we should try to feed into over the next 3 months. So I have very concrete suggestions on what we can do. Governance has many types. There's economic governance. There is international governance, multilateral. There is political governance. meet, increase the frequency at the lower levels, the bureaucratic, civil society, the various tracks. That is where the future bottom-up of this organization, institutional governance, will strengthen. Not top-down. I'm not saying that political leadership and vision is important. Both are important. But the symmetry needs to come from below, from the inter-bureaucratic policymakers and exposures that are happening at that level. Second recommendation is on the budget of BIMSTEC. I remember a time when I was studying BIMSTEC when the budget was $200,000 a year, around 15, 16. Since then, I think we've come a long way. I recall the grant that India gave in 2022 of $1 million towards the Secretariat. That was a single country support from India. I would say at least double or treble it. If you throw money at regional organizations, they will deliver. I remember a time when BIMSTEC had 3 directors. I think I now believe systematically there are 7 directors in place. I believe the new infrastructure is in place or being built, the new headquarters. I remember the old building. You cannot run an organization with less than 10 people, which was around 2014 the case. I think things have improved, but we have to focus on endowing this institution with resources. Yes, it is member state driven, absolutely, but member states can dream, we can dream and give ideas about expanding BIMSTEC, adding observers. If you do not have, and this is the basic history of regional organizations, we know it everywhere. ASEAN is a good example of that. If you don't have experts, staff at these organizations, nothing will happen. They will just be glorified schedulers calling for meetings, etc. So let's endow BIMSTEC through budgetary support to hire experts. Why not create a research institute? Look at the ADB and what the ADB Institute has done for the ADB in terms of research and feeding into the ADB's policy making at an MDB level, but maybe at a regional organization also we could have a strong research institute that is subsidiary to BIMSTEC but autonomous to develop knowledge. Second, political governance and the difficult D word, democracy. I think BIMSTEC is stuck, and many of us here in the region are stuck between the Western formalism and frankly also coercive approach to democracy, human rights, and a very Western approach to democracy. And on the other hand, a lot of people telling us the development and economic growth are politically agnostic and neutral, right? That democracy is even a problem for growth and delays growth. We know both those narratives. But I think beyond that, we need to focus on 2 concrete things that we can do in BIMSTEC to find a BIMSTEC way to democratic development. One is exchanging best practices in terms of elections, in terms of parliamentary oversight, management, etc. There's a lot of expertise in the region, where no one is perfect in the region. There are different levels, but what we hear a lot in the region is countries actually requiring support. I'll just remember again the case of India, which I know best. India has trained under its parliamentary training program over 300 people from the 6 other member countries since 2014. So this means 300 parliamentarians, staffers from Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, all other BIMSTEC countries have been trained in India. Similarly, under the the Election Commission of India, hundreds of other BIMSTEC officials have been trained in how to run elections, how to go more digital in terms of electronic voting machines, how to think about new forms of election, how to train about election finance, etc. The second suggestion on the democratic side is that what I'd say is important on the digital side. We heard about digital trade in the previous session. It's very important to think about digital public infrastructure. And digital public infrastructure is inherently also a political decision. How do you want to have systems of data and flows that are open and accountable to citizens? And that digital public infrastructure is being developed across the region. India has its own model. And is responding to a lot of partners, including Sri Lanka, for example, that are seeking to adapt India's model to its own. But there are other models in the region, and Thailand is very well equipped because Thailand is leading the sector on connectivity and has under that a very important digital connectivity dimension under BIMSTEC. So that could be a very important suggestion, I think, to have a BIMSTEC digital public infrastructure charter, where countries think of what should be the normative political values that should regulate digital public infrastructure within BIMSTEC. It's not a difficult thing. It's basically a declaration of intent of these 7 member states to come together. Last, security governance and what I call cooperative or security, collective security. We heard the Deputy DG this morning of the Thai Ministry of Foreign Affairs interestingly mention the maritime shipping agreement, or cooperation agreement under BIMSTEC that is about to be signed. And she said that this will facilitate trade in the region and shared security. This means that you cannot have maritime economic cooperation. You can have a lot of nice agreements about shipping and ports, but you also have to be able to secure ports, shipping lines from a variety of threats, not state necessarily, but non-state. And we heard about the crisis in Myanmar and how that is affecting also the economic flows in the region. So there's a huge agenda of what we can think of on economic and human security under BIMSTEC. Maritime, infrastructure security, health security, cyber, digital security, climate security in the region, water security, extremism, which is developed already well under BIMSTEC, financial flows and security, investment screening mechanisms, a big issue that countries are facing in this region, and broadly HADR, humanitarian assistance and disaster rescue operations. So here I only have two final suggestions. Go beyond the consultations that are happening as we speak also in Delhi and focus less on the hardest security dimension, more on the economic and human aspect. Build and adapt on the ASEAN experience. Both Myanmar and Thailand are ASEAN members and are part of the political and security pillar under ASEAN, and a lot of that can be transferred to BIMSTEC. Increase the exchanges, and maybe, second suggestion, if all countries could make a declaration that, which I would call BIMSTEC security first, that if there's a disaster or a security threat within the region, they promise to look within the region for support, security support, first, before they go outside BIMSTEC. And I think there's a lot of expertise within the countries that can be shared between countries when there's a national disaster, security disaster, a digital disaster for the future, an energy disaster, a variety of security threats that will happen and that will require support from within the region. So the more we focus on responses within the region, we also enhance the capacity within the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You mentioned about the important point. You mentioned about why there are several types of governance. You mentioned about how to increase the friendly of the meeting from the bottom up, from bureaucratic level to decision-making levels, and how to increase the budget run BIMTEC more effectively. I agree with you very much. And BIMTEC need experts in order to build stronger institution and development of political aspect of regional institution. For example, conduct the training of multinational officials to better equip with political progress. And also, I would like to move to the last panelist, Associate Professor Tom Pratt, Journalist. Please share your inside information because we have only limited time. Briefly.
It seems like I have 1 minute left, so please excuse me if I exceed the time a little bit. But I'll make sure that I won't take an hour. Just kidding. So basically, for the governance part here, I'll be short. So I'll be focusing on one side of governance, which is transparency, implementing strategies to enhance transparency here. So let me start off with this. Okay. So first of all, corruption. We need to know, and we need to admit that corruption is a borderless problem. This is one case that occurs. Things like this occurs all the time. Big companies pay bribes to officials from different countries. Apparently, in this case, in various countries in this region, officials who receive bribes then extract resources from other countries in the region, and then linked with high officials. In this case, the Deputy Secretary General of the National Anti-Corruption Commission itself, which is right. It's something that when we talk about governance, and this is the problem we are facing, and the problem that we cannot or have not been able to tackle this problem quite effectively and efficiently is that because information is not shared. For example, in this case, this person was later found that he owns a large luxurious mansion on Knightsbridge in London, which the Thai authority didn't have, or the authority in these countries, which of their officials have received bribes, did not know. And it took a while before the DOJ and SEC could investigate and found about this. Oh, sorry. Let's keep going back. Sorry about that. So basically, it's a high risk. So from this map, you can see that this area is not doing very well on the corruption perception index, and we have to admit to that. And so what's the risk? The first risk is that, well, at the national level, the law are getting tougher. For this example, this is a law in Thailand that we are increasing punishment, increasing the comprehensiveness of anti-corruption, anti-bribery law, but not only at the national level, at the global level as well. The Foreign Corrupt Practice Act is getting harsher and getting more comprehensive and effective in the States, in the UK, in Japan, and even in OECD countries. What does this mean? It means that companies in this region is vulnerable to being investigated by authorities from these countries, and they will get all the fines. We do not get any share of that, and if not only that we don't get the share of any fines of billions of dollars of fines, we don't get the information to convict people who receive bribes. So in that case, if we don't collaborate, if we don't cooperate together, share information, we are at risk. What is more is that I've recently attended several conference organized by international organizations like the UNODC, which you mentioned, and I realized that many of the firms, international big firms, is taking precautionary measures. For example, they're using platforms which public procurement platform that look at the corruption risk of each suppliers, and they use CPI, Corruption Perception Index, which means companies or suppliers from countries where CPI is low, like ours, may not be procured. Our product may not be procured by big international firms, and that's a very big risk. So it's bad for everyone in the region, basically. We all know about this. So what actually can we do about it? Let me very quickly share you with this story. Think to yourself, how much would you pay for these things, these treadmills? A couple of $100s, right? This is what our authority, the Bangkok Administration Office, paid for these treadmills, $21,000 for a treadmill. You wouldn't do that, right? How do we know about this? Because we have the information. So basically, based on the research that we conducted at the Faculty of Economics, Juฬา, we developed a platform that, an open data platform that accumulate public procurement data and linked with company registration, and basically, so this is what you see. So basically, you can put treadmill into there, and all the projects with the word treadmill the past 5 years will show up. We use technologies like AI to detect potential corruption. So, for example, this is the case, and you can see the yellow exclamation marks there, meaning that there's a potential corruption there. So where is it? So you can see that this, for example, this case, only 2 bidders enter the bids, and they propose almost exactly the same price. There's 0.08% difference. And when you click on the company which won the bid, you'll see that this particular company won 5 bids earlier than this, before this one. Why do I keep showing this? Because it's not a small case. It's one company won 7 projects in 2 years, in total of $2 million US dollars. And cases like this doesn't happen in Thailand only. It happens everywhere. And companies like this do have transactions with other countries in the region. This company might be selling their equipment in India, for example, and you wouldn't know because information is not shared. So my final point is that maybe if we are trying to establish an economic zone or economic cooperation together, maybe we need to think very hard about this because it's a high risk, but we do have potential to collaborate to fight this. Maybe we can identify anti-corruption database. What needs to be shared? Because of course, disclosing data doing any activities. As you mentioned, we need money, right? But we don't have money to do many things. So maybe we can collaborate together, find what can be shared together. And when we know when we can identify these data sets, we can talk and start discussing the standard. Because even though we started to think, well, maybe we want to share information, but with different standards, computer cannot read that, right? And luckily, there are international standards available already. For example, these open data standards by various international organizations, which still needs to be discussed. And there are examples. Shared database like this will help making platforms like what I showed possible in this region. And this is something that has happened all across the world. So it's for a platform like this to search, for example, search at the name of our current prime minister here, and it show that he owns a house somewhere in the States and the UK, for example. So this will help us maintain collaboration across regions. And this is what we have been doing at the ASEAN level gradually. But we do have opportunity here to facilitate all other dimensions of economic cooperation with a strong foundation of good governance through transparency here. So thank you very much. Hope I didn't spend too much time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very interesting. I think we have delay now. So I would like to close this session. And thank you all panelists for share your very important information. And I think we have many things to do, how to bring the good governance to BIMSTEC country, what region and individual country we have many things to do about the corruption, about transparency, and how to add more role for the civil society to bring BIMSTEC either from the top to bottom to all people. BIMSTEC it for all people in the region to move forward together. Thank you very much for the panelists and Professor Masufara for your time to join this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the chair and the panelists for this session of governance. I'm sure that we already wake up because you mentioned the thing that we haven't heard outside the rooms. You're talking about the policies, about the corruption. And luckily, unfortunately, we don't have much time for the questions. But if you have any questions, you can leave the questions somewhere